married, even though they haven't yet seen each other. Marriage feast is a central part of the ritual, and there are, in some writings, special bridal garments are mentioned, but it's the father of the bride who blesses the couple, so no presence of the priest or like Jewish priest is necessary. How in the late antiquity, for instance, in Rome, what you would have is the gathering in the house of the bride's father. Bridegroom arrives, exchange of vows, signing of marriage contract, and this is important. A respected woman called pronuba, it joins the hands of the bride, right hands of bride and groom, and this is considered very important custom. And the bride was given over to the groom's house, and the bride came in, touched the house fire, and proceeded to the chamber when the special wedding hymn called the Epithalamus was sung. What we have, and that's what we have about 1st to 4th century in Rome. What do we have in the Christian church at that point, from say 2nd to 4th century? There is no evidence there were any special customs involved. However, it was in 1 Corinthians 7:39, it says that marriage must be done in the Lord. And of course, we have Ephesians 5, which is still Ephesians 5:22-33, where the marriage is considered to be symbolic of the union of Christ and the church. There is one important thing, another important thing, there is a definite tradition of celibacy in connection with baptism, especially in the early Syriac Christianity. Of course, there were some radical Gnostic sects, as Encratites, who rejected marriage altogether. But there was an idea, there is evidence for the idea that probably borrowed from kind of certain Jewish movements, pre-Christian movements, such as featured in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which considered the members of the covenant as to be in a state of a holy war. And if you're in a state of a holy war, it imposes on you as a member of the covenant, a state of virginity. Hence, it is possible that at some point, in a very early point, only those who vowed virginity or marital abstinence were admitted to baptism. However, in the Syriac writers as Aphrocite and St. Ephrem, it seems that they did consider marriage lawful, although they considered the state in which they themselves were a state of virginity as preferable. Remarkable is the evidence from apocryphal Acts of Judas Thomas, where there is a description of bride and groom entering into the bridal chamber, and the Christ appears and convinces them to not to enter into not to consummate their marriage, and eventually there is first we have a prayer of the Apostle Thomas, then you have appearance of the Lord and his injunction to the newlyweds to maintain virginity, and that's as a result of it, they do not stay married, but they claim that they are entering a true marriage, which for them is because they have made a true bridegroom, which is Christ. However, in the radical position, which it required, which rejected the marriage, considered marital status and the baptismal vows to be and baptismal status to be incompatible, it required some moderation by the church. So we have the canons of the Council of Gangra in the 4th century, who against those who abhor marriage or treat the marriage abhor marriage at all, who consider or treat the people who marry as being below themselves, or refuse to participate at the divine liturgy when it's celebrated by a married priest. There is another point. There is a definite Judeo-Christian tradition of a mystical significance of a marriage in connection with the temple. For instance, there are certain traditions where the one of the part of the sanctuary in the Jerusalem temple, where you have the two cherubim overlooking the ark, where the cover of the ark, where God appears. The cover is called propitiatory, or in the RSV or English translation is called mercy seat, which is not exactly good translation. Its proper translation would be propitiatory. It's where the elasterion is called in the scriptures, in the Septuagint scriptures. So the sanctuary becomes as a sort of a location of a mystical marriage between God and Israel, and more allegorically will be certain person's soul and God. And in some writings, as for instance the homily of John of Jerusalem, Bishop of Jerusalem in the end of the 4th century, the successor of the famous Cyril of Jerusalem, he has a homily where he describes actually goes through a list of types applied to the temple. And one of the types, when he goes to the end of the sort of culmination of it, he exclaims, or when he comes to sort of speak about the sanctuary itself, he exclaims, "O great marriage feast and marvelous proclamation! The bride is the church, and the bridegroom is Christ. The apostles are virgins, according to Paul. Those whom God has put in the church are first apostles." Okay, and then he goes through the actual types, comparing the church with the virgin, and the virgin wedded to Christ. So you have definitely, when you speak about sacrament of marriage, we have definitely this undercurrent and this tradition, and this is one of the reasons why the sacrament of marriage is why the marriage becomes a mystery, or some fathers call it mystagogia, the entrance into the mystery. So if we go into the 4th or 6th century, this would be kind of next stage of our development. We have a diversity of customs among different churches, but what becomes usual is the celebration of the Eucharist in connection with marriage, and you have certain kind of a combination of certain Christian elements and traditional late antique customs, which become received by the church and sort of in quotes baptized by the church, by being accepted in usage and reinterpreted in a Christian sense. So you have, as a Christian elements, you will have definitely Eucharist and the priestly blessing. Then you would have in late antique customs, you would have a marriage gift to the bride, which the remnant of this is the ring. And the joining of the hands of bride and groom, which would now not done by some respectable woman, as in the Roman rite, but by a bishop or a priest. And putting a certain special garment or veil, which is kind of remnant in the Western tradition as so-called the rite of veiling of the bride, sort of called velatio. You would have putting on the crowns, which would be at that point would not be imperial crowns as we have them today in the Slavic churches, but would be garland wreaths, would be crowns or wreaths. And procession of the newlyweds into the house, the singing of hymns, a procession, the marriage feast, of course, and crowns already mentioned in Tertullian, in Gregory the Theologian, and in John Chrysostom. John Chrysostom considers the marriage crowns the crowns of victory over the pleasures of the flesh. And Gregory the Theologian also mentions some elements of the marriage ceremony, as ornamenting the bridal chamber with flowers, gathering of people, a joining of hands, marriage feast, and singing of wedding hymns. And Gregory suggests that for this wedding hymn, we would use Psalm 127 as it is. And so